Welcome to Life with Strings Attached. I'm your host, Jamie Gale. Today on Life with Strings Attached, we're joined by Robert Robinson of R. Robinson Guitars in Chicago. Blending craft, artistry, and engineering, Robert Robinson built on tradition through innovation. A student of classical guitar in 1976, Bob decided he needed a hand-built instrument, so he paid a visit to the workshop of luthiers Harley Day and Michael Patel in his hometown of St. Petersburg, Florida. He didn't get the guitar he was after, but he landed a position as a workshop assistant where he learned the craft and traditions of the luthier and built his first classical guitars. In the early years, Bob built primarily classical and flamenco guitars, both along very traditional lines. But when he and his wife founded Troscan, a Chicago-based furniture design and manufacturing business in 1999, the experience greatly influenced his guitar making. Energized and challenged by the demands of manufacturing, he was fueled with a love of innovation, a search for new solutions that impacted his approach to guitar making. Bob's offering now includes both acoustic and electric guitars whose design construction blends together techniques and materials greatly informed by his broad experience both as luthier and furniture maker in clever ways that has garnered the attention and admiration of the guitar industry's most well-respected and famously critical minds. It was a pleasure to have Bob Robinson on the show, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did.
Hey, Jamie.
Bob. Great to see you. Welcome to Life with Strings Attached. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks. No, thank you. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. How are things there in the big city of Chicago?
Oh, things are fine. Weather's getting better, and I can't complain. No, everything's fine here.
Mm-hmm.
Are you in Canada?
I'm still in Canada, yes, but for a short period of time.
Okay.
I'll be out of here shortly. Head back to Italy in the next couple of weeks. So
That sounds awesome.
yeah, just as the lake starts to thaw and the mosquitoes start coming out, I'll wait for them to die and I'll come back.
Oh, okay. All right.
So yeah. No, things are good. It's been a fine Canadian winter. Lots of snow. There's been 3-4 feet of snow on the property for a couple of months now at this point, I think. It's receding now.
Wow.
So
Yeah, we didn't get much snow this year.
oh no.
That sounds awesome though. 3-4 feet sounds awesome.
If it's going to be cold, I want snow. Just
exactly.
gray and rainy in the city. That's not so great for me.
Yeah. No. It's a beautiful sunny day here, but that's the thing I dislike most about Chicago is the grayness in the winter.
Right.
But I do love Chicago. It's a good city.
Right. But you're born and raised in the sunny state of Florida.
I was.
Yeah.
I was raised in Florida, St. Petersburg,
St.
Florida.
Petersburg.
The time we called it Wrinkle City. I guess it was so many old people, but now it's like a hipster place.
Really?
So, well, it definitely is becoming a hipster place. The downtown, it's on the water, and the downtown was mostly inhabited by like snowbirds, and then that sort of started dying out, and a lot of places were boarded up, and like a lot of, in the 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
It was dying.
It was dying out.
But now it's
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you've been in Chicago probably longer than you were ever in Florida. How long have you been in Chicago now?
40. Well, okay. So I moved here in 81.
Mm-hmm.
So 40. What is that? 46 years.
Yeah. 45 years.
Yeah.
Something like that.
45.
Yeah. Almost. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
When Reagan was president. It's elected
That's
in 81.
Right. Reagan was president.
Yeah.
What? No, was it 80? Wasn't it 80?
Well,
76.
now
80?
I looked it up very recently.
81?
And he was elected in 81.
Okay.
Yeah. I have some theories on all that stuff. And so I was looking back and sort of thinking about how all that works out. And
okay.
And Reagan was an interesting time because I've heard people talk about it. Honestly, I was a little too young. I'm born in 76, and so I'm 5 years old. But he's the first American president I became aware of because he was also on TV a lot and in pop culture a lot. right? There was a, you
Yes.
know, who was it? It wasn't the Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, Genesis. There was a Land of Confusion video,
Yeah.
and they had all the puppets, and there was Gorbachev and Thatcher and Reagan, and
Yeah. Yeah.
in this video with the talking heads sort of thing with these puppets. And so even as a child, you became much more aware of the politicians of that day, with the Cold War
Yeah.
ending and the coming back together of East and West Germany and all that. Yeah, yeah. And so,
Yeah.
anyways, but the reason I brought it
And
up is that there's a flip. There's a lot of people today who are classical liberals who say that they supported Reagan, but it was a conservative kind of time. And it wasn't conservative. It was just that Reagan wasn't really that conservative. It was a time where things kind of flipped and people sort of traded sides
right.
in a similar sort of time that we're in
Right.
today, and where people are trading sides a little bit. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but Reagan was conservative by comparison to for instance Jimmy Carter.
Right.
Like for instance, Jimmy Carter had installed solar panels on the roof of the White House, and Jimmy Carter, trying to save energy, wore a sweater and turned the heat down at the White House, and Reagan came along and removed the solar panels from the White House. So I'm just saying, compared to Jimmy, Reagan was, by today's standards, Reagan was a liberal.
Yeah.
But by in those times, Reagan, I would think he was a conservative.
Yeah. But every once in a
Yeah.
while, things sort of kind of flip the other way around. Traditionally, the things
Right.
that one party voted for historically, you now associate with the other party, and that happens over the centuries. It happens multiple times. This kind of reversing of the polarities, I guess. I don't know.
And I don't know how are we. I don't know if we want to be talking politics on the.
We talk about anything. You don't have to talk about it, but it was just 81. You mentioned it, and I was thinking about Reagan, and I was thinking about how the polarities flip.
Yeah.
And I'm personally of the opinion that democracy works because we have polarities, and that we have to have an official opposition. Otherwise, we have tyranny with an official opposition.
Yeah.
And so I think we're better together. I'm not a hate on the other side kind of person. Even though I don't always like what the other side is saying, if I find myself on a side, but usually I think that people have legitimate cares and interests, and that we need to take them both seriously.
Yeah, I agree. I think that many times our differences are not as great as the politicians would like us to believe.
Yeah, or the media.
Yeah, or the media. Yeah.
So, all right.
It goes.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So, let's sort of give a little bit of backstory here for those who are just getting to know you. You and I have spent many hours talking, and so I know that you were born and raised in Florida near St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
But so, you grew up in Florida. You made your first guitars there in Florida. So just give us a little bit of a backstory. What was it like growing up in Florida for you? And what sort of moments do you think were defining for the Bob Robinson that we might know today, sort of in your history, getting to this point?
Okay. So I don't want to ramble on too much, Jamie. So things that I think are defining is that my mother was a high school math teacher, and my father was he was trained as a diesel mechanic, and I would say that I was brought up in. He became a computer programmer on the job when he was working as a maintenance man. But the reason I'm bringing them up is that I wasn't really brought up in a household that had there weren't no arts in the house. Mm-hmm. We didn't have a record. We didn't listen to music. We had those paintings. We didn't have any black velvet paintings, but we might as well have had black velvet paintings. And so I was brought up not really exposed to the arts. But my mom was she was like, she wanted me to learn music, and so I started out taking piano, and I was not a good student. That was like 6 years old, and then tried taking guitar lessons, and I got put in a room with this guy who was kind of, he wasn't cruel. He had no patience, and he chain smoked, and I gave that up after a couple lessons. It was like a little tiny room, just big enough for two people,
and a cigarette,
puffing away, and whacking my hands because I kept looking at the fingerboard. So then later on, she hooked me up with this man, Joseph Lazaro. He was I'm guessing that Mr. Lazaro was probably like he was a professional musician, and he played jazz, traditional jazz, and he had a flamenco guitar, and he played flamenco and that sort of thing. And so he was the one that really got me into the guitar. And he was a kind man, and we would play. He had all this. We would play duets together. We had a lot of fun playing the guitar. Then I was playing the guitar, and in high school, I always made things, and so I decided I was gonna. Actually, I got a little job. There were 2 music stores, and I really didn't have any experience, but I got these jobs repairing guitars, which would be simple repairs like set up a guitar. Set up the guitar. I did do some fret jobs and things, but I really didn't know what I was doing. And so then I got some books. And at the time, there was a book by Irving Sloan, and that was Irving Sloan had written. It was actually classical guitar construction. Now I found that at the library. So then I'm like, oh, I'm making a classical guitar because that's what I wanted to do. Then my mom happened to know these 2 guys who were guitar makers and period instrument makers. So meaning they made lutes, like Renaissance lutes, they made violas, they made harpsichords, they made guitars, they made clavichords, spinets, all sorts of instruments. So I went over there, and my mom told me about them, so I went over there, and I actually wanted to buy one of their guitars, but I ended up not getting the guitars. But after being there for a little bit, I said, I want to make a guitar. And so then I got a job. I call it a job. I didn't really make any money. I just traded. So I would go over there after school, and I would do things like they had a little winder where they would wind the strings for the harpsichords, or they needed legs for the harpsichords. And I knew how to turn on the lathe. So when I say I know how to turn it on, I knew how to turn it on, and I knew how to turn on. So I would do
carving
jobs
away
for
of
them.
material on a lathe. Yes.
yes. So I would go over and work with them, and then they would teach me how to make guitars. And so when I say teach me, they would explain to me why they were doing what they were doing. They would show me their fixtures. I go home, make the fixture, get that part done, and then go forward. So that would have started in 75. And then by 77, I was actually looking at my first guitar last night, and the label says 77 on it. So it took me a while to make that one guitar. It probably did take 2 years. But I remember I sprayed it. The way they finished, they used, back in the day, automotive finishes were lacquer and they were enamel. And so what they used is they used enamel, like a clear enamel, and they had the guys mix it this way and that with no dryers and whatever. So anyways, I sprayed the guitar in my garage with that automotive enamel. It's a good finish. And then I left it. I think I probably left it for 6 months because I didn't quite know what to do with it after that. So it just hung there. And I remember in the wintertime, it would have done that in the summer. In the wintertime, I went over and looked at it and decided I better finish up. So that's kind of how that went. I just fell in love with guitars, though. Making that guitar, I fell in love with it. I started making more guitars. In 1979.
That's a classical guitar?
I don't know what. Yeah,
and did you build it in the traditional way on a Solera?
Yes, it's very traditional. I built it. It actually had a cedar top, so that in a way is not traditional, but it's extremely traditional with the sides let into the neck, everything was very traditional. And that I just got turned on to doing that. And then I built, maybe 6 more guitars. And then by 1979, the Guild of American Luthiers, they were having an exhibition in Boston at Boston University. I went up there with my sister, who's a year older than I. We drove up there, stay in the dorms, and I met a lot of cool people. And I lost my train of thought there, but just that was really exciting. And I met Donald Warnock, who was teaching at Boston University. He was teaching period instrument making. That was really exciting. Oh, I met Bob Ruck and Richard Brenet, both who are, well, Bob's passed away, but both of them are world famous classical guitar makers. Mm-hmm. I'm still friends with Richard. Mm-hmm. Actually, he used to live, well, his shop used to be, I don't know, 6 blocks away from me. Now he moved to a suburb. He's 45 minutes away. The taxes here are very high. He said, have to make 6 guitars just to pay your taxes. Right. Of course, he's so famous, he doesn't need the location. So
right.
Anyway, so I guess pivotal moments. Well, we can figure out where they were. I don't know. Playing the classical guitar, mm-hmm. learning to build the classical guitars, going to Boston. Yeah. Then what happened though is I was in 79, and my father didn't go to college, and my mom was the high school teacher. Like I said, she said, I don't care what you're going to do, but you have to go to college. Mm-hmm. And so I looked around, and I ended up going to furniture making school at Rochester Institute of Technology. Mm-hmm. And so that I always imagined at the time I was in love with harpsichords, which now I listen to the music. I love the music. I don't really like the harpsichord. Mm-hmm. At the time, I loved the harpsichord. Anyways, I wanted to, what was that guy's name? It was 3 Centuries of Harpsichord Making. I can't say his name right now. Anyways, I had met him at Boston University, and I thought it'd be really interesting to work with him. But Hubbard was his last name. Anyways, but I never, so I decided to go to RIT, and then my 4th year, I thought I'd build harpsichords, but I didn't. I actually ended up leaving RIT, and I went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I got a degree in sculpture. And then when I got out, I realized I had no way of making a living. And so I went back to making furniture for people. So I was making furniture, and then I started building. So I was making furniture and building guitars, and for much of my life, I was doing both like that in parallel. So,
and in Chicago. That. So once you went to school there, you stayed in Chicago evermore.
I stayed in Chicago because, again, I had no good way of making a living. So I was like one of these pioneers. I moved to the West Side where property was cheap and there's lots of gangs and all that sort of stuff. So I bought an apartment building with a storefront, set up shop in the storefront, and that ended up being a great investment. Actually, it was great.
In the West Side of Chicago.
When I got West Side of Chicago. I sold that when I was a little older and moved to a nicer neighborhood and had moved to a nicer shop.
Right. Now, this is the same West Side of Chicago that Jim Croce wrote about?
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know where Jim lived, but the whole West Side of Chicago was pretty, if he's talking about the West Side, yeah.
Well, he talked about the baddest part of town. Area. That's where bad Leroy Brown was.
Leroy Brown. Yeah, Leroy Brown. I can imagine Leroy would have been.
Leroy would have been there. Interesting times.
It was really tough. It was a very bad neighborhood.
Yeah.
My car was, I had Molotov cocktail go through my car window, and saw several people shot dead on the street. Yeah, I mean, it was bad.
Wait a second. Why did you have a Molotov cocktail go through the car window? What
Because I couldn't.
That's
Because I moved to this neighborhood, and I was naive. I didn't really understand what I was doing,
mm-hmm.
and the building had been owned by the Spanish Cobra. The man who owned the building, he was relatives of these guys who were Spanish Cobras. They were controlling the corner. So I got
Spanish
there in the
Cobras
wintertime.
It's a gang. Is that what you're telling me?
Okay. Gang, Puerto Rican gang, yeah. So when I got there in the wintertime, everything's quiet. Nothing's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden springtime comes, and there's a gang sitting on my front door, in my front porch. I was like, holy crap, what am I going to do? And so at first I said nothing. For about a day, I said nothing. And then I thought, you know what? I'm not going to live in fear in my own house.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm going to live here, I got to go out and talk to these guys. So I went out and I said, hey, this is my house. Like, I don't want you hanging around my front porch and blah, 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 blah. And so that went on and on for a while, and had different confrontations. And then one time, you push too many buttons in terms of causing them problems, and so they pushed back, and then so they burnt my car up.
Were you in your car?
No, it wasn't in my car. It was just
when you said that the first time. I'm picturing you driving down the road, and a Molotov cocktail comes sailing across the street.
No, but I did have stuff. Actually, a couple of times. One time I was chased in my car and the guys I could see in my rearview mirror that the one guy was passing the gun from the back seat to the front seat. And so I didn't stop at any corners until I got away from them. No, it was.
Were they the same guys? Did they identify themselves with colors?
No, they were different. Actually, they were Mexican guys, and I don't understand. I think it was actually New Year's Day, and I kind of suspect there was a bar literally across the street from me, and I had never really bothered those guys or said anything. Never really. I was in that bar once, but it wasn't a place you'd go, and so I didn't understand why they were. I think they were just I don't know, drunk, and thought they'd start out the new year on shooting somebody. I don't know what their deal was. I never had problems with them again.
So
we don't have to keep going on.
No, I love this actually, Bob. I'm sorry, but I'm going to want to know more and more. So in one of our previous conversations, just to round this out with a trifecta of experiences in your west side of Chicago. Is this the same place where your beautiful little chisel handle comes from? Is this the same place?
Yeah, it's the same place. So,
would you mind telling the story on this piece for our listeners?
Yeah, and I wish I had. Oh, so the alley was not too tidy, so there's a lot of junk and crap back there. And I was, like I said before, I was on a corner, so that's where corners. Okay. Well, I won't go into the whole setup of how guys sell drugs, but basically they're hanging around. They have people who are spotters, and then they have people who would come up and say, "Hey, we want to buy something." Then they would have guys go back and get the drugs from the alley, and they're on bikes. They're just kids. They're like 13 years old. And they would bring them up, and they would exchange, and that was that. So I was always in the back. And there was a lot of prostitution because a block away was the highway, the ramp for getting on and off the highway was a block away. So that's another good. I mean, that was prime location for the guys selling the drugs. So because people would get off the highway and they'd come over and get their stuff and go back on. Also, same thing with prostitutes. So there would be prostitutes all strung out, hanging around, they sitting on your steps and all over. And so in that there was crack at the time. That was a lot of, I'm sorry, prostitutes don't really tie in the story. They just color it, but it wasn't really relevant. Sure. So I was in the back cleaning up around the garbage cans, which I had found, found pot, and they used to put heroin in these little aluminum, they're about that big, little aluminum foils. And so you find all that stuff back there. So I was cleaning up, and I found what I thought was a handle, like a little handle. It's I wish I had it, but it's it's like a size of a pin, and on one end was a little brass ferrule, and the other end just looked like a chisel handle to me, but the ferrule had been burned, so I thought, well, that's kind of weird. It's also weird that there's a hole that goes all the way through this thing, but I thought, well, maybe somebody had heated the tang of the tool that was in this thing and pressed it in to the ferrule to fit it. And so I needed a little chisel for cleaning out the dado that's on a classical guitar bridge, for where the saddle goes. So I took a square needle nose file and I ground it to make a chisel, and then I installed it into this handle. So I was using it one day. A guy comes by who was clearly knew more than I did, and he said, "Bob, where did you get that?" And I said, "Oh, I found it out in the backyard. Isn't that in the back alley? Isn't that a cool handle?" He goes, "Bob, that's not a handle. That's a crack pipe." And so, anyways, so that's it.
It's rosewood, right?
So anyways.
Or something like it?
Well, it actually does look like rose, but it looks like some hard tropical wood.
Right.
It's not like, I don't think it's, I think some hard tropical.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, it's a funny.
So, and at that moment, you didn't decide like, oh, I don't want this in my life. You just thought,
no, I was, it's charm. It's fun.
And the brass ferrule, does it remain?
Yeah, the fat brass ferrule is it needs to be on there.
It's still there?
Oh yeah, well yeah, because it's like every chisel handle. Well, not all chisel handles have a ferrule, but generally you'd have a ferrule if you're gonna, if it has a tang on it. It's not like a mortise chisel where the handle slides into the end of the chisel.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So I knew about your chisel. I did not know about the Molotov cocktail or the being chased with a gang and a gun out on New Year's Day. So how did all of that resolve? Like, how long did you stay there? And how did you leave?
I was there for 10 years. And, actually I was there for 10 years and I owned it with my first wife. And we were not getting along, and so she wanted to stay, and I didn't want to stay there any longer, and so I sold my half of the property to her, and moved out. So that's how that resolved this marital problems.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So,
and you moved on, but you stayed in Chicago. You were still making furniture and guitars?
Yeah, I was making furniture and guitars.
What year is this?
Okay. That would be like 90. Okay. It would be like 94 when I sold.
All right, so we're mid-90s now, year before the internet goes live for the public. So this is...
Yeah, and I for some reason was like one of these late bloomers when it comes to the internet. I didn't have a phone, or I don't think I had a phone until maybe 2008. I thought it was ridiculous that you needed to be so connected. But my wife now, she's a little more forward thinking in that regard. So
okay,
she got me a phone.
Right. So 94, you moved somewhere else to continue making furniture and guitars.
Right, and so I'm making. Basically, what I was doing is, I had this furniture connection, and there's a lot of money making furniture, and so so I was making, at that point I was making flamenco and classical guitars. There's a flamenco guitar scene here in Chicago, and I really love the music, and I like, it's just fun. It's always at a bar, and you go out and have a beer, and there's dancers there and all that business. So I gravitated to the flamenco guitar making at that time. So that's what I was doing. And that's a lot of fun.
Right.
So, anyways,
Okay. So, so here we are. It's mid 90s. You're making guitars. You're making flamenco guitars. And part of that
yeah.
scene, you're making furniture. Now, at what point in time does the Etruscan part sort of enter the scene here? Or is there something else significant before this part?
Uh, no, I was just making. I was what happened. Well, what was significant is I met my wife that would be in '96.
Mm-hmm.
So in '96, I met my wife, and I kept doing this. She had a job, and I was still making the guitars and the furniture until the year 2000. Mm-hmm. And then we decided we would start this furniture business together that we have Trosky. Mm-hmm. And so we did that. And honestly, from 2000 to 2008, it was so overwhelming with figuring out how to run a business, a real business, that I didn't make any. I was like made no guitars for those 8 years. Mm-hmm. And then after the 8 years, I said, man, I've got to like make guitars again. I really I've enjoyed this. I've learned a lot from this. I'm learning a lot from this. I can live in a nicer neighborhood, blah, 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 and all that stuff. But I just love making guitars. And so I just started making guitars again.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
While running the business.
So 2008 is a important year in world history. So, did you decide that before the global financial crisis? No, I mean, it's May of 2008. I mean, countries went bankrupt. Cities went bankrupt. I mean, it was a major transition time. It happened in May of 2008. And you got a cell phone. I mean, what a year transition,
Yeah.
So...
Well, it may now that you're bringing up, it may have been 2007. I got that cell phone I've been 2007 because I remember we were doing a job in New York and I needed a phone, mm-hmm. and so she got me that phone so that I could communicate with her, and so that would have been 2007.
Was it a regular cell phone?
But yes, it was one of those flip phones. You flip it open.
Yep. It happens to be the year the iPhone I think came out as well. I bought one of them in New York. They weren't available in Canada yet, but I bought one in New York City. The first iPhone.
The iPhone. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, this was a regular, I think, I can't remember. Anyways, I can't remember. It was that Swedish company, I think.
No, Finnish. Nokia. Yeah.
Finnish. Pardon me, Finland. Pardon.
They're often mistaken as Swedes. It's like Canadians are always mistaken as Americans and New Zealand as Australians. It's a neighbor syndrome. Famous neighbor syndrome. So, okay. So this is a major transition time. And so can I ask, did you decide to return to guitars after the global meltdown or before? Do you know? Was that related to it?
I don't think it had to, or no? It wasn't really related to it. It's just that it's very satisfying making furniture and we're very successful at that. And there are a lot of challenges, a lot of problem solving, just like in guitar making, just a lot of bigger equipment, larger machinery and things like that. So it's not like it's boring work. It's actually quite exciting to do. And I learned a lot from that. And I think my guitars benefit from that, but it's not making the guitars. What I love about guitars relative to furniture is a guitar it's a tool. It's a tool. It's used for a lot of things, but I see it primarily as a tool for making music, and it has to work. Like I like to say, nobody would buy a hammer that didn't work. No one would go, this is the coolest looking hammer I've ever seen, but it won't drive a nail. It just wouldn't sell. And that's what I like about guitars, is they really have to work. You can't hide behind the way it looks. It has to, in the end, be a good tool. And furniture, it can hide. Some, like for instance, chairs, maybe not so much, because it's more something you're interacting with. But a lot of furniture could be poorly made but beautifully finished, and a lot of people wouldn't be able to see the difference. And so I really like the fact, I'm looking for the right word, but I just love the high bar as I see it in making guitars, because they're musical. Yeah, I like that about them. And so I just wanted to go back to doing that. There wasn't anything to do with the financial debacle.
Okay. All right. Now, if I may give just a little bit of pushback here for our listeners who don't know, I mean, you also make challenging furniture. To be clear, you do unnecessarily complicated things when you make furniture. You have this, I don't know whether you call it a coffee table or a settee, whatever it is, but the one that is sort of leather covered but has a walnut tray on it, and the tray slides from one end to the other, but so that the tray doesn't cantilever and you can move it easily with one finger. You developed a tensioned cable system which you cannot see that exists within this. That a lot of other people would have just put a walnut tray on top of the object and not been so concerned about how it was going to move from one side to just pick it up, Bob. Pick it up and put it down somewhere else. But that's not okay for Bob Robinson. Was that you? Is that Deirdre?
Well,
who actually decides that?
No, well, we have to give my wife Deirdre the credit for wanting it to slide.
Okay.
And then I engineered how it would work, but she was the one who said, this is what we want. And then I engineered how it worked. And it's a very practical thing to develop a system like I did, because when you start, our furniture goes actually not as much anymore. It's mostly all over the country. It has gone, like I have a table in Korea right now that they're having a problem with, and I have to deal with fixing it from afar or sending somebody over there. So when you send these things off and people have very high expectations, then if there's something goes wrong, you have to figure out how to make it work right. And so the cable system allowed the tray to function properly and reliably. So I did it because I don't want problems,
And is that typical?
It's just a self-serving thing is what I'm trying to tell you.
Yes, that's a nice way to dismiss it. But there's lots of people who would just kick the problem down the road, as Homer Simpson famously said, that's future Homer's problem.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't build that in now. So can I ask, is that a typical scenario where the design impetus is Deirdre and you're the engineering mechanical side of things with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's the way, that is basically the way it goes. I do, when you're prototyping, if you have a drawing, even if you had a drawing of a guitar that you wanted to make, it's when you start making it, who makes it is going to, in the end, influence how it's going to appear. I mean, it's because, drawing's a drawing, and real life is real life. So, yeah. So, but it's subtle. It's not like she's the one who's giving the design directive.
Well, I think this is an important part of your narrative, Bob. And so I don't want to linger too long on this, but the point that I want to make for our listeners, and they really should go check it out, is that your furniture company with you and Deirdre Troskin is a really sophisticated, beautiful, high quality furniture that you're not cranking out tables and bookshelves in the way that are in most people's homes. Your furniture is akin to the types of guitars that you make as well. Someone has to really care about quality and design to want to invest in a Troskin piece. They're not inexpensive. They're costly because the methods and materials are the right methods done in the right way that arrive at a cost which is higher than what's in most people's homes, which is the same thing you do with your guitars. And the reason I think that's important is because, when you come to the NAMM show, the Boutique Guitar Showcase with your guitars, you catch the attention of people from Callings and from vintage guitar people who don't spend a lot of time looking at new instruments, people like Mark Stutzman and TJ Thompson.
Right.
And it's because of your unique approach to your guitars. They look at your joints and what you're doing and your purfling, and they go, oh, how did you arrive at this decision? And that, I think, is a very clear line to your career as a furniture maker, and those things that bleed over into your guitar making. From my perspective, I think that should be emphasized, because you're not beholden to traditional luthiery methods when you see something go, no, that's clearly a better way of doing it. And you're very happy to shed the traditional way, because that engineering, mechanical, functional way of doing things, it has to be right for you. And just like that cable system.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, I kept kind of butting in there. Yeah, you're right. And I want to thank you for the compliments. But yes, the furniture making, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't, it completely changed the way I think. And yes, I am very happy to give up. I know the traditions. I think it's important to understand the guitar making from a traditional standpoint, but I am very happy to abandon the traditions if I think something else is better. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you have a candid way about it. You're not romantic about it. You look at that and go, well, that's just a bad idea. And this is just a much better joint. Yeah. And you are that decisive about it.
Yeah, that's true. And I am probably a little cavalier sometimes, but yes, I'm very confident about my decisions, and I'm growing more and more confident. You know, the more you do things, the more comfortable you are doing them. And so, yes, the more I change things, I could tell you a little bit about what I'm doing next that's related. Mm-hmm. But yes, the more you do things, the more you are a part of change, the more change becomes comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like right now, I'm building, I haven't built a classical guitar in 30 years. And there's a fellow in town who had found out, he bought one of my guitars from back then, and he contacted me, and I had two guitars that I hadn't sold, and so he bought those two guitars. And then he said, I really like these guitars. I'd like for you to make me a guitar. And I'd already been thinking about making classical guitars again. So I'm very excited about this. So where I'm going with this is I don't know if I should say it or not publicly, but so I bolt on the necks for the steel string guitars. So this classical guitar, I've been working. I just came from drawing before we met. Started our meeting. So this guitar is going to have a bolt-on neck. This guitar is going to, oh gosh, I don't know how much I should say, because it sounds so weird. But it's everything I've learned from making electric guitars and steel string guitars, I'm going to incorporate into this classical guitar. And I'm very excited about it. I think that it's going to make an awesome guitar.
That's great. You can talk about it from my perspective. If you don't want to, that's okay. Let me give a caveat. The traditional way of building a Spanish guitar on a Solera is a mass manufacturing method. They cranked those guitars out. That's not all about tradition and necessarily the only way to do it. That is absolutely about consistency and ease and speed of production to do that in that method. And so, I personally don't have any problem with you moving on from that.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I think that people like to romanticize what was happening in the past, but of course, in the old days, these guys weren't getting paid. They aren't an expensive instrument. They had to make them as quick as they could. We like to romanticize all that stuff, but yeah, you're right. But no, it's just, let's see. I mean, now it's like I can't think of all the things that I'm going to do, but let's go through this. So I'm going to have the bolt-on neck. I'm going to.
Will that bolt-on neck
um,
still have a supported fretboard inside that replaces the structure that is normally there with a traditional classical guitar?
yeah, yeah. The neck will go through just like on my steel strings. So
Yeah.
the neck comes up. It actually ends at the 18th fret. So the 19th fret is cantilevered, which is just that one. On a classical guitar, it's just E and E.
Mm-hmm.
So those are cantilevered over.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit it's at an angle. The neck is at an angle, kind of like a Humphrey guitar. So it's and that's sort of a function of being bolted on.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna, how I reinforce my necks with these thin wall steel tubes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna use one thin wall steel tube, like a kind of like a truss rod. You'll see people using carbon fiber and stuff in classical guitars, or you can see ebony, you'll see like on a Ramirez or something, a piece of ebony running down the center. So I'm going to use a steel tube that you can't see.
I know that, but our listeners don't know that. Can you explore that for just a second? Because I think that's a really interesting approach that you do, and the reason that you do it, as opposed to doing what everyone else is doing. Why do you use this?
Okay, so what happened was, originally it actually goes back to the electric guitars. Mm-hmm. So I was reinforcing the electric guitar necks, and I was actually reinforcing with carbon fiber. And then, if you'll recall, I used to bolt the heads onto my electric guitars. They were machined out of aluminum. I bolt them on. I don't actually do that anymore. But in order to facilitate the bolting on, I changed from using carbon fiber rods to 3/8 inch diameter thin wall. So they're only 28 thousandths thick. So like less than a millimeter thick, maybe like 3/4 of a millimeter. Anyways, so I started using those tubes because the tube was reinforcing the neck, but it also was interfacing with the bolt-on system. And so it was just a better way of doing it. So, and I like the way the necks were very stable. The guitars had a lot of resonance. So I really like that. So then I adopted that to the acoustic, the steel string guitar necks. And those necks have a truss rod along with this pair of tubes that are hidden inside. And I think you'll know, I know, like, I was talking to the guys at Collins, they use a pair of little rectangular pieces of steel in their neck, and they do it according to them, because it gives it a little bit of a ring. And I think it does give you a little bit more resonance and sustain. So anyways, so then I'm like, well, I like it for all that stuff. I'm going to try it with the classical guitars. It won't really add any weight to speak of, and which I don't want. Classical guitars are very light. I don't want the guitar to be imbalanced, but I think it will improve the way the guitar sounds. I think will improve the stability of the neck. So I'm going to do that. I have a bridge. My bridge doesn't have a traditional tie block. I've only made a couple of these when I fit just before I stopped. But the bridge has the tie block and the saddle are integrated, and you wrap the string around twice to attach the string, but it removes the tie block from the bridge, so it's quite lightweight. You lose a lot of mass there. I'm going to use. I had experimented in the past with.
Why do you want to lose
lattice break?
Why do you want to lose the mass there?
I want to lose mass because I want to have as much stiffness as possible, and I don't want any unnecessary weight. I want to have the face as stiff as possible. I want to be able to transmit the energy from the string out onto the face and get the face moving. But I don't want to burden it with extra weight.
Can you make it too light?
Oh, I don't know. I can't say that. See, you'd have to experiment. That's what I like to say is a lot of people make a lot of claims, but there's about what they do being better or worse, but very few of us have time to actually set up an experiment and you'd have to take a guitar body, you'd have to make bridges, and you'd have to glue them on, or however you might want to attach them. You'd have to, have to listen to it. And I have never done that, so I can't answer that
Well,
question.
that's true, but you're going to go lighter based on theory rather than experiment.
Exactly. I'm going to go lighter. Based on idea. I see the face as the engine. So I'm trying to give it as much energy as possible.
Okay. So what you're doing is a common way of thinking about it. I sometimes theorize and wonder about losing amplitude and momentum.
I can see that.
If you reduce the weight from that part of the body too much, is that because of the weight, you can get greater amplitude because of momentum once you put the energy into it. Theoretically.
I understand. No, I understand what you're saying, and it's. I have heard people talk about that, and I have not experimented with it. The strings, of course, have mass, and once the face vibrates, it energizes the rest of the guitar, and it starts moving the air inside of the guitar. I don't, again, like I get good results, but I don't want to pretend like I know everything about this. I just know what I know from what I.
I was curious about your thinking through it. So when you said you were going lighter, I challenged you. Yeah. Your response to the challenge is, well, that would have to be tested.
Right.
But you're moving on faith ahead in the direction without saying, well, that has to be tested. So you're sort of applying a scientific method in one direction, but not the other, possibly.
Yeah. So what I've decided to do, because I've thought of I'm a different person than I was than the last time I did this, and so actually I looked at my guitars from the past, and because I kept a lot of records, and I looked at what I was doing, and then I actually went through some books on classical guitars, like historic classical guitars, and I looked that have all the dimensions and everything. I looked through that to see what they had done, and then I said, well, I'm going to start here, and you have to start somewhere. So I'm going to take my experience, and I'm going to apply it and anything else that I've sort of extracted from somebody else's experience, and I'm going to start in this position, and then I'm going to make a guitar, and from there I'll go forward. Mm-hmm. I can, because you have to start somewhere, and so that's how I'm going to approach.
So these are okay. So this is the set of assumptions you're going to start with for Bob Robinson 30 years later.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Fair.
Exactly.
So then you were talking about,
we'll call it 2.0.
2.0. So you were saying that you've experimented with lattice bracing. So did you want to say something about the bracing? Is something going to be different with that?
Well, I'm gonna try that. Okay. Traditionally, I always built the guitars with fan braces, which are along the lines of the Spanish guitar makers. Sure. And then Greg Smallman is the person that I'm most familiar with that lattice braced his guitars. Yes. And so I'm going to brace my guitars similar to that.
I've heard it said that the Smallman top also is extremely thin, supported with the lattice. Are you going to try in that direction also?
It's extremely thin. I think he's at 1 millimeter, mm-hmm. Which is about 40 thousandths of an inch. I'm going to build it at 60 thousandths. So, which is, what's that, a millimeter?
That's 50% buffer.
Yeah. Well, it's a place to start, right? So what I'm going to do, though, at the upper end, starting from the sound hole, okay, it's going to have a transverse brace on it behind the sound mm-hmm. hole. And so starting from the sound hole forward, I'm going to laminate a 16th inch thick, in certain areas, a pad of spruce, slightly cross-grained, but not 90 degrees, but maybe 45 degrees to the grain direction, to stiffen all that up, just beef up the guitar where I think that it needs it.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll remain light.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyways, I think it'll make a great guitar.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
Yeah, I would
Find
I
out.
would love to see that when it's done. I don't know if I'll ever have a chance to interact with it, but we'll see.
I'm thinking you will.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
It's
or one like
it. Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Prominence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com. Are you serious about the business of guitar? Then you need to join us on Patreon. We're building a future where guitar makers are able to live prosperous lives, making instruments that inspire the musical experience, which helps to create a more beautiful world. Where others who are passionate about the guitar can thrive, those who help in the promotion and resale, trade shows, writing of books and articles are supported as a valuable part of the community. A community where we explore with curiosity and encourage those around us in their endeavors. With a community effort, we can accomplish far more than we can individually. So let's be serious about your guitar business and join us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Jamie Gale Music. We are better together, so let's do this together. I love where we've been, and I'm excited about where we're going. You know, one of the things that I appreciate so much about you, Bob, is your experimental nature. You know, and I think that you're
Thank you.
This doesn't sound sophisticated enough, but you are a tinkerer, and I don't mean that in a bad way. You know, and as a matter of fact, I don't know if we could get you to make the same guitar exactly the same way again. I think you're always going to make a small adjustment, at least a small adjustment, if not a substantial adjustment, as you carry on.
Yeah.
So, are there two R. Robinson guitars out there that have been built the same way?
No, because like everything, in every moment, you're always learning. So if you make a guitar, you'll all of a sudden know more than you knew when you're done, you know more than you did when you start. So I can't understand why you would make another guitar exactly the same.
I think it depends on what you're aiming at.
You always, well, I mean, if you have orders and people are expecting it to be exactly the same, then of course you build it to be like that. Mm-hmm. But if you're just building it, you're building a guitar and you're building it to experiment or just to grow. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I don't see the point in. I don't even, and that's the problem with taking orders. You build, a person gives you an order and you build a guitar and you sort of feel compelled to sort of do what you did before. I think in an ideal world, you would never have an order and you would just make them and people will come along and buy that guitar for its qualities. That to me would be the best way. Like I was into violin playing for a while in my 40s. I got really into playing the violin, and they have a really interesting way of selling violins. You go to the store and they take your name and they would give you like 3 or 4, you play some violins, they give you 3 or 4 violins, you take them home and you play them for a couple of weeks and you bring them back. And I've always thought that was a great way of doing. Of course, the violins they aren't perfect condition. They're all old and dented a little, so you wouldn't be damaging, you wouldn't be denting a pristine.
Not notably, anyways. Yeah, or noticeably. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that is an interesting way. I kind of like that idea. Yeah. As a matter of fact, that's even the Warby Parker model. You know, for the people who disrupted eyeglasses. You know, they'll send you 3 or 4 pairs. You try them on and return 3 out of the 4, and they'll bill you for the 1 pair you kept. You know, which is interesting. It could be pretty costly putting out 4 instruments at the same time to somewhere.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The economics are complicated.
But it's yeah, I understand that. But I think it's a beautiful I think it's a I don't know, I think it's a great way of getting to know instruments.
I agree. And so, you know, the challenge then is, how do we create such an environment? Is that something you're trying to do right now?
Well, you're ahead of me. So my answer would be no. I am. I have moved. I have moved our shop. We just moved our shop, and we are just setting it up. We'll be functional by the end of this week completely. But we are going to have a showroom space in the front, which I haven't ever had before, and we will have our instruments out there. So I'm trying to facilitate people being able to come in and play the instruments at least. And I do. I've people come in and ask, show an interest in the instrument, and I give it to them. I would just hand it to them and say, here, bring it back in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I haven't had a problem with that.
You know, I had similar experiences. So when I was a teenager, there was this little tiny guitar shop down the road from me called the Music Shack. And it was literally, I don't know, maybe it was a 10 foot by 10 foot sort of space with an older gentleman in there who was always fixing something, but he had some guitars for sale. And I didn't have very much money as a teenager. And I remember he had some BC Rich black dreadnought that I was sort of checking out. He's like, why don't you just take it home? He said, just take it home, bring it back next week, get to know it. I don't think he knew my name. Like, it was just that sort of trust. And he really won me over with that sort of experience. And, the thing is, later on, when I was 25, I ended up owning the store that he
that's
7 years later. He ended up suffering with mania. He had grown the store. He had a much larger store at that point in time. And I sold him a bunch of guitars at that point on the used market. I would find things that were unknown, the unique instruments that people didn't know how to value, the unusual things out there, Rivera amplifiers and such that were kind of boutique. I didn't know they were boutique at the time, but I knew what it was, but the other people didn't know what it was. And I'd resell them for a profit. And I ended up owning that store, but the relationship started with just this strange sort of, I know you could steal that, but just take it and come back with it. I'll trust you. And that paid out. And I did it later on in life too. And I remember really won over customers. I remember a customer ordered a custom guitar from Europe. I won't say which brand it was. That was a lot of money at the time. I was in Canada. They were in the US. I shipped them the guitar and they said, it's really incredible. I'm not really in love with it. It's not really what I said, and I talked to him, described to me what it is. I said, okay, well, what you're actually looking for is this guitar. And I said, tell you what, I'm going to ship it to you I'm going to ship it to you. Just give me your address. I'm going to ship it to you. You don't have to pay me for it. Just if you like it, we'll do an exchange. Do it. He loved that other guitar. Like, he ordered the first guitar based on some review he read somewhere else. I had never tried to talk to him about why he was buying that guitar. The second iteration was me understanding who he was. That I think you're looking for this. Sent him that, but it was not a cheap guitar. It was probably an $9,000 guitar at the time.
Oh wow!
And I shipped it across an international border, to a guy, and he's like, "This is it, man. This is exactly the guitar." He gladly paid for it and shipped the other guitar back, the return guitar. And sometimes those completely seemingly unreasonable risks are actually kind of the right way to do it somehow. Yeah.
I think most people are good. People in general are good people. I think you can trust them. And I don't know. I think you can trust people.
We have to trust each other to a certain extent to get along in society. The social contract.
So I don't know. Well, where do we go from here?
Well, I think we can continue that thread for just a second. Would you do that in your old place on the west side of Chicago?
Well, sure, because the people who come into the shop are musicians and people that I did give the guitar to this one guy who came in, but his which I was a little nervous about at first because I really didn't know him, but his girlfriend was coming around getting leather from us, and she was making shoes. And one day he showed up, and he was quite a character, and he was all crazy about the guitars. And I said, "Why don't you just take it?" And he took it, And in a couple of weeks, I hadn't heard from him, so I said, "Hey, bring it back." And then he brought it back the next day. So, so yeah, I would. I will continue to do that. Yeah, I'll continue to do that. So there was this one guitar. So I have this one guitar that this just happened. There's a guy who I can't remember where he lives. I think let's say it's Connecticut. Anyways, he had heard about my guitars, and actually this guy in town here told him that I had a guitar, and he played it, and he said, "This is a good guitar." So I sent it to him, and he thought he was buying a new guitar because after a while it had a crack, which was very discouraged by. The guitar is like almost 30 years old. It had no cracks in it, and then I left it in my basement at my house, and the boiler's down there, and it gets like 10% relative humidity. And I went and opened the guitar one day and had this crack. I was like, "Oh crap!" Like all those years, Bob, you took care of it, and then you turned your back on it. So anyhow, so I fixed the crack and I sent it to him. And he gets there and he goes, "Hey, it has a crack." And I go, "Well, I know it has a crack. It's 30 years old and blah, blah, blah." And so I said, "If you don't want it, just send it back." So, but he said, "No, I want it." So he took it, but then it's a flamenco guitar, and it's set up, a flamenco guitar, the strings over the face, by the saddle are very low because you want to facilitate the tapping and everything. So, and he's not a super experienced player. And so he started noticing that and not liking that. And so then I felt like, I said, "Well, send it back to me. I can adjust, you can't adjust the neck angle on a classical guitar without removing the back." But I said, I can easily adjust the fingerboard to where, just basically redo the frets and adjust the fingerboard. So I said, "Why don't you send it to me and I'll do that for you?" But that was a case where I thought, see, like I wish that, of course I did give him the chance to send it back, but I just thought, I hate this about guitar making, this aspect that bugs me. So
you mean just that they can find something that they want different?
Yeah, sure. And then I never know if you're supposed to just, I always feel like you should just stand by your product no matter what. And sometimes I feel like, some people take advantage. Sometimes you feel like it's not really appropriate, but you just feel compelled to do it. To, like, you could say, "Hey, that guitar is set up for what it was meant to be set up for, and I can't help it that you want something slightly different, but that's what that's supposed to be." And so that's one thing you could say. But on the other hand, you could say, "Well, I want this person to be happy with my instrument. It's not all that much work, so I can do it. I can accommodate him."
Yeah.
So I feel like it's good to accommodate him. So, anyways,
yeah, I mean, there's a bit of a pleasing the customer. There's some social responsibility kicked in there. There's a bit of a buyer beware, and it's not that you're warned, but it's just, there's a reasonable time assessment period to sort of say,
right.
This is the time to find anything. It's like if you move into a new place, you've got to find any problems and report them within X amount of days, or else you didn't do the due diligence and you didn't buy it that way or whatever, right? And so they're challenging to navigate, but as long as you keep a good spirit about it and everyone's trying to be understanding.
Yeah,
but stating the terms ahead of time is probably important.
Yes, I think you're right. And I'm not bothered by it in particular. Just the thing that came up is related to what we're talking about.
Yeah, but it's relevant for our listeners, both guitar makers and guitar buyers, to think about this, right? What is a reasonable amount of time to consider something, and what's fair to everyone involved. If it's 24 hours doesn't seem enough, because then you've got, I don't know, something came up, your kid got sick, whatever, right? But 7 days is probably a a reasonable period for someone to sort of, despite what life
Yeah, I
throws
think
at
so.
you,
Or
you know?
even a couple up to a couple weeks, so the person really has a chance to get to know it.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, with the guitars, they're they get damaged quite easily if you send a. Now that this case, it wasn't a brand new guitar, so it wasn't perfect, but if you send a perfect guitar, like Charlie that I work with, we're always saying, yeah, it's got to be perfect, but then give it a week with the person playing it, and it won't be perfect anymore.
Yes.
But it has to be perfect when
On
it
delivery.
leaves.
Yeah. Not just when it leaves,
And
but
so
when
if
it
you send
arrives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But if you send it out and somebody plays it for a while, you are taking a chance that they could damage it in some way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, for sure. And
but all this leads me back to it'd be nice to have people just come into the shop and pick out the instrument and say, this is what I want, and I understand exactly what it is, and then seems like a really nice approach.
I agree. And there's some other things that happen in the classical world that are different than what happen in the steel string world or the electric guitar world.
Yeah.
I've heard it said anyways that there are some master classical guitar builders who won't build you a guitar until they watch you play a guitar, and you have to fly in there and you have to play in front of them. They have to understand who you are and how you approach the instrument. Then they'll decide whether or not they're willing to make you a guitar based on the interaction and how you play and whether it's going to be the right pairing. Do you know that to be true? Is that have you heard similar things? Or
well, I don't know of anybody. I don't know of that firsthand. It seems to me like I don't know. It seems like if somebody wants to buy an instrument that I don't know. I don't know that.
Yeah. I don't really operate in the classical guitar world so much, and so that's that's just a rumor to me. I don't know. I can't validate it. So I thought you might know, but maybe it's all.
No,
maybe
I can't validate that for you.
Yeah.
No, well, just because I don't know, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Sure.
I don't. I've never
heard that. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Okay.
It seems very. I'm looking for the right word. I don't know. It seems. Well, I can't think of it. It just seems quite fussy. Rarefied was the word I was looking for.
Well, I agree. The challenge is at some point in time, if you're in such demand that you have to find ways to limit the field, if you will, limit who you can build for and who you can't build for.
Sure.
Some of them are simply practical, where it's prices that go up as demand goes up, so that you quell the demand a little bit and limit the field. And then there's very extreme companies like Ferrari, where they won't sell you a Ferrari unless you already own a Ferrari. You have to be having that Ferrari serviced at a Ferrari dealership, and you're not allowed to own a Lamborghini. If you own a Lamborghini, Ferrari will not sell you a car.
Oh my God.
You have to agree to sell the used one back to them. They have to have first right of refusal. Well, there's all these conditions about being. Now, however, as far as profitability is concerned, Ferrari makes the highest profit of any car manufacturer in the world on a per car basis, and not by a little bit. It's like, it's like really substantial. It's something like, they make something like $108,000 on a car, and the next closest highest profit margin on a car is Tesla at $6,000. Like, it's like from 6,000 to 108,000. It's so remarkably different.
I'm surprised to find that out, because I don't really know anything about the manufacturing process, but I would just think that there's kind of, I don't guess they're handmade, but just it just seems like Ford or somebody who's making millions of cars a year would be the one with the highest profit margin. But clearly, I don't know anything
on a per car basis, not on the company basis, but on a per car basis.
I understand.
Yeah,
but going back to the guitars, obviously, if you have high enough demand, it would be better to sell your guitars to. It'd be if I could sell my guitar to anybody, I would much prefer to sell it to a very serious musician than to, well, to anyways. I just that the better the player, the more exciting it would be.
Yep.
And to get feedback from, like for instance, to get when you sell the instrument and somebody's playing it, you talk to them about it, you are going to gain a lot of knowledge, from talking to these people. And so I would much rather hear what an experienced player has over an inexperienced player.
I think that that's a common theme amongst guitar makers, that they really want their instruments to be played. There's often they're at odds with selling to someone who they know is collecting guitars to the volume of, they can't possibly be playing all of those guitars actively.
Exactly.
And so that bothers them a little bit. And, I recently saw a bit of a short documentary, maybe 20 minutes, on an exhibit of John Monteleone's guitars at a Long Island museum. So John Monteleone, the famous, mostly archtop guitar maker, lives out on Long Island, New York. And there's a Long Island museum that I think is responsible for promoting Long Island culture, I guess. And so they've done this special exhibit on Monteleone's, this huge collection of Monteleone's, including the Four Seasons, which I thought was owned by the Metropolitan Museum. Maybe it's on loan. But there's this, he's never seen so many Monteleone's in one room. Like, he built them all, but he's never seen them all in such a space. And towards the end of the documentary, you've got John being interviewed and walking through this collection. And he wraps up the interview with sort of saying, I hope long term that these instruments are going to get played, and I hope people are going to make music on these guitars. And so he didn't say it as much as please take them out of the glass cases, but you can see there's that inner turmoil, the inner sort of conflict. Like, he probably appreciates and wants to be respectful of the fact they're honoring him. But on the same hand, there's this other side that says, those are good guitars and mandolins, and please someone make music on them for history, for 400 years from now, like we might on a Stradivari or an Amari or something of the sort,
Exactly. Well, in those cases, I know that, at the Metropolitan, I know they have people who play those. They take them out and they play them. I don't know if it's every day, but they intentionally play them. And then the violin world, a lot of the players who are playing these instruments wouldn't actually own the instrument. Somebody else would own it, but they would give it to this person to play. I'm talking about the performers. So there's a woman here in town that I know plays a Guarneri, and she doesn't own it, but she, that's my experience with that.
So how do you feel about that as a guitar maker? Are you emotionally invested in the idea that the instruments, get played for centuries? I mean, the way you build your guitars, there's no reason that it can't exist 300, 400 years from now, if cared for properly.
Well, it would be awesome.
It's likely, isn't it?
To think that. Well, that's kind of seems like I'd like to think it's likely, but I think it'd be great it would be great. I mean, of course, it'd be a great honor. I'd be dead, so I wouldn't know about it. But I want to me, being useful, like I want to live my life in a way that I feel like I've been of use. And so if I can make something that brings people pleasure and allows people to make music, I feel like that's a useful way for me to spend my time. So if I can make something that somebody, after I'm gone, and the further back you go or ahead you go, the more kind of amazing it would be. So yeah, it'd be awesome.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So in the last year or two, I've had more and more conversations about legacy and succession, often with guitar makers who have built a brand and they have employees working for them. that presumably,
Yeah.
when they die, the factory isn't just going to all of a sudden stop, everyone go home, find something else to do.
Right.
So the conversation is about the succession, but also about the legacy and what does succession look like? Is it enough for a venture capitalist to buy it, move it on to a factory like the Norland years for Gibson, or the CPS years for Fender, and have their brand sustained? Is sustained is not dead enough, or do you want it to look a particular way? And what does it mean to carry on? That's the legacy part of this.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I'm putting together a small symposium meeting of the minds of some of these people in Tuscany in the coming weeks, where we're going to gather together and discuss what this all means and what the solutions can look like. You should have a perspective on this. You're of an age where many people are thinking about their legacy. You have a child, you have your guitar brand, you have a successful furniture brand as well. And so what are your thoughts on does legacy mean something to you? And if so, what does it mean? And what do you hope for the future? Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Prominence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com. Are you serious about the business of guitar? Then you need to join us on Patreon. We're building a future where guitar makers are able to live prosperous lives making instruments that inspire the musical experience, which helps to create a more beautiful world. Where others who are passionate about the guitar can thrive, those who help in the promotion and resale, trade shows, writing of books and articles are supported as a valuable part of the community. A community where we explore with curiosity and encourage those around us in their endeavors. With a community effort, we can accomplish far more than we can individually. So let's be serious about your guitar business and join us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Jamie Gale Music. We are better together, so let's do this together. I love where we've been, and I'm excited about where we're going.
Oh boy. Well, since my guitars, I come at the guitars like it's an personal exploration of making these guitars. So and designing the guitars and challenging different ideas I have. So I don't really care about the guitar going on. I don't have any idea that the guitars will go on because it's an exploration of mine. And when I'm gone, well, I'm gone. I'm not exploring anymore. So I don't feel that way. And if I had a company with lots of employees, then I would definitely be interested in that, because like you said, I have a daughter. Then it has some monetary value outside of myself or beyond myself. And then I would be interested in it simply because I would want to benefit my daughter, or if you had a bunch of employees, you would of course want them. Their lives are important. They help you make this thing, not the guitar I'm talking about, but they help you make this business. Without them, you would have no business. If you're talking about something with many employees, so they're important, and you would want to see them be able to continue on without you being there. Like I see that I've become, as you mentioned, very beginning, good friends with the guys at Collings, and I don't know the exact structure, so but I can only, I don't know business size what the structure is, but I know that Bill passed away just a few years ago, and I believe that his family is probably has ownership, but they have a lot of great guys over there who who are taking that legacy forward, and they take it very serious. And like, I mean, it's just an awesome group of people, and it would be, in that case, it would be to me tragic to see something like that fall apart. I mean, it has a culture. You know, all these businesses would have a culture, and they have a very good culture, very good. It's very innovative. It's very inclusive, and so, like in that case, I think it's something worth carrying forward.
Yeah,
and respected.
Yeah, that company culture is an interesting thing. It's a very popular thing to talk about these days because very large companies like Google will talk about a company culture. But
right.
In a recent interview I did with Frank Daimel, a German guitar maker, his father was a denturist. They made dentures. They had about 60 employees for it.
Yeah.
And Frank was talking about going over for his dad's 84th or 94th birthday. His father is retired at this point in time. But him and his dad share the same birth date. And so he goes and celebrates it with his dad. And a number of the employees that worked in that factory come over for the birthday also, even though he hasn't done that for a long time, because those were special and remarkable years for those people. And that
is the company still going on?
No, I actually don't know the answer to that. I should have I should have known that. But it was a part of it. This guitar maker, the father wanted the sons to take it over, and he did go for a short period of time to learn how to carve teeth and that kind of thing, but ultimately it was not going to be his thing, and he became a guitar maker. As is the story of many people of that generation. You know, the war generation worked really hard just to sort of stay alive, and their kids said, "I don't want to work as hard as you. Were never here. You know, you were you were always working and not concerned about the house or food." They decided to pursue a life that they thought was more enjoyable or meaningful to them, instead of taking the family legacy and succession with the company. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
That's a question about the succession, you know, with the company that you share with your wife, you know, is that ultimately, and you don't have to answer this, but there is a question of, does our daughter grow up to run this company, you know, and do we pass that on to them? And then there's the big question of, if we do that, do they actually even want it? Right? Like the scenario I just talked about. He raised it up for his boys, and the boys said, "No, thank you."
Right. Well, so in our company with the furniture, I guess whoops, my thing, these things. I guess it's sticking in there. Anyways, with our company with the furniture, it's a large company. Well, it's not super large. There's actually 27 of us now, and so that I would hate to see. We have such a great group of people, and there's a lot of young guys in there, and it's really a pleasure to work with these young people. They're totally different than you are, but these are really smart, high quality people, and I learn a lot from them. And it's just a pleasure to sort of see them growing and contributing, and I would like to think that we have something that could go on, you know, because we have a product line, and I think it's a structure that could be passed on. But that's a totally different thing. My relationship with that is completely different than like with the guitar making. So, anyways.
Yeah, theoretically, they overlap, whether you're making dentures, furnitures, or guitars. You know, that
well, they do.
You know, conceptually, the idea that we've created something, and do we expect something to happen? I know people I've talked to about this who said, you know, listen, when I'm dead, whatever, I've already given it away to, you know, I gave my business to this employee. I gave this thing to this family member. I've actually already wrapped those things up. I've got money, and I'm done. And when I'm dead, I'm dead. I don't care. Others.
Yeah.
So there was a venture capitalist walking around the NAMM show this year, going to, I won't name the
Okay.
companies, but companies who have well-established brands but aged owners, and they identified the silver-haired people at the big brands and approached them
Sure.
at the
Sure.
show and said, can we?
Yeah.
Are you interested in selling the brand? And of course, these people talk amongst themselves. It's one of the conversations that ultimately came around to me about this opportunity. And when you look at the website, it's very clear that this person buys and flips companies. And the thing is, none of these people in the musical instrument industry can bear the thought of just cashing out and having it flipped and it possibly going away. They definitely want it sustained. They want a sustained value. They care about it. They want someone to care about it. And they want someone to care
Sure.
about it for an extended period of time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you have a company, whether it be a little thing like whether it be one or two people or 50 or 60 people, I mean, you work hard at it and you build it, and it does have a life of its own, And so, I I would hate to. It has a life of its own, and that life, I think, reflects the 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 founders a lot. I really do think that the people who start this company, or pardon me, something just some alarm went up. Anyways, I think that the person who starts it, especially if you start it and it's just you and one other person or something, and you build this thing up, it takes on your personality, and I think that it's a reflection of your ideas. And so, I mean, yeah, it would mean a lot to people. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Sort of fumble around
Well,
with
that's
it.
all right.
So,
I'm sure you're going to send me a message next week and go, Jamie, I've been thinking about that thing we talked about. And that's it.
oh my God.
That's the way it happens, So maybe you haven't put a lot of thought into this topic at this point in time. One of the things I did know is that there was a guitar maker who passed away, and I really loved his design. I'll say who it is. It was Rolf Spuler, a Swiss guitar maker. And Rolf had a guitar called the Bird of Paradise, which was a really interesting solid body electric guitar, but with nylon strings and a poly bass that when you played a chord, the technology recognized the low fundamental and would send a second signal out of the low fundamental to a bass amplifier. And it was a really interesting guitar, and it was just a beautiful shape, a very beautiful shape. I think it was a sculpture unto itself. And when Rolf passed away, somewhat unexpectedly and younger than many people are when they do, and I tried to get a hold of one of his guitars to display at a special guitar show in Europe called the Holy Grail Guitar Show, and the board agreed to it. And I contacted the family. They didn't have one, and they didn't actually know who did, because they didn't stay in contact with the customers. Rolf did, and Rolf was gone.
I see.
And that really stuck with me, the idea that the family didn't have one of their own. And many guitar makers I know have that, they make a guitar, they sell a guitar, and keeping a guitar means it's not for sale. And many of them, prioritize the customer and the sale. But if they really stopped and thought about it, it's, would I want my family to at least own one of the guitars? The answer might be yes. And so,
yes, exactly.
and that's a part of, okay. So that's a part of that legacy and succession conversation, right? Like you don't, it's an exploration for you, but actually given the scenario, you do care that your family keeps a Robinson guitar.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
As far as the family goes, no, I would want them to have it. I think it's awesome, like to have something. I think absolutely. Remember I showed you that little can that my father made that had the so I have that, and I just was setting up my little drafting area where I do all my thinking, and I made a little shelf and I stuck it on there. And so I think having something that important person to you made is like there's nothing like it, especially like if it's a tool. Can you imagine if like somebody was a musician and they were using their guitar as a tool, that would even be better. But yeah, I think that having something that like your father or mother made, and they touched it, and it was important to them. That's like, there's nothing like that.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and I associate that story of that little can with the pour spout that your father worked on
Yeah, exactly.
very closely with you. Actually, it's a part of what informs me about the personhood of Bob Robinson.
Oh, well, thanks. That's a compliment. That's a compliment.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I do think about those things. As a matter of fact, you did a recreation, not of the can exactly, but you abstracted that sort of concept.
Yeah, you have a good memory. Yes,
I do.
And I put that next to the can on the shelf. I made.
Yeah. What is that? What were you?
But it's not as nice. Well, it's not special. It's didn't transcend his. Let me say that.
Yeah.
I actually don't think it. It's not as charged. Of course, all this stuff is quite personal. So I started to say it's not emotionally charged like the thing that he made was for me. So it's not that special.
Can you bring our listeners into the fold here and tell them the story of this can we were alluding to?
Okay. So when my father passed away, we had a shop in our garage, and so my mom asked me to go in and get things that I wanted. So I found this can. It's the tin can, like probably tomatoes or something like that came in it. And so he was always making things, and he worked on our cars a lot. And so he needed a can that had a pour spout. So he bent and the lip of it, the rim, to make a spout, but he did it so perfectly, especially if you've done things like that yourself, you know how it takes a lot of care. It's like you could see he took a pair of needle nose pliers, hooked it on there, bent it again. He made this beautiful little spout. So you could see exactly how you would do it. And he did it with such care that, and so I always said that was basically my father, because one, he was very cheap. He grew up during the Depression, so he didn't have a lot of money. So he reused this can, and he was all about utility, which I said earlier, I love the idea of being useful. Mm-hmm. So it was all about utility, and he did it he was all about craft. So it combines those things that are important to me about him into this one little simple utilitarian object. And it's all been, over the years, it's turned black. It's got natural patina on it. It's quite striking. Yeah. So then I took a piece of steel. I was actually taking a class on welding. So I made a little cup that was the same as it in shape, but it didn't have the spout actually. And then I heated up with the torch and gave it the same sort of patina. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful little thing. The one I made is beautiful, but it's it's not special like his. So.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love it, because an object which material value can be charged with a lot of emotional value. That the tin,
right. And that's kind of an interesting thing. I think about that. I've showed that to my daughter, and I've told her how important it is, because I worry, like, I'll pass away eventually. I worry that it'll just go in the what the hell did he have that thing around here for? But if you tell her what it's about, and she values her relationship with my dad, and so she'll hopefully carry that on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, the narrative.
As you get older, you think more about these things. Like when you're 20 years old, you're not thinking about the tin can your dad made.
Yes. Yeah,
it's an age-related thing.
Well, that narrative, that storytelling, is part of the legacy that we're talking about, right? And so, in marketing, there's this concept of the rule of three, Now, the rule of three simply means that you can only expect someone to remember three things. So if you're going to get them to remember three things, what three things are you trying to get them to remember? And that's an interesting...
Well, I guess the same thing. Oh,
that's right. That's an interesting exercise to sort of go through, to sort of say, man, if my kids could remember one thing, or if my spouse could remember one thing about me, you know, or three things, what would those three things be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to answer.
No, I don't expect you to answer that right now. I think it's a fun little exercise. My wife and I have this little ritual where I usually get up and do some work before she does. She's more of a night person. I'm more of an early morning person. So I get up and quite early in the morning, and I'll read. Sometimes I'm up as early as 3 or 4 o'clock. Other times it's 5 to 6 is pretty normal for me. But she gets up around 7, and she sends me a message, and I always feel amazing when I get the little message because I know what it means. You know, she lets me know that she's ready for coffee, and so I go make her an espresso, myself an espresso. And I climb back into bed, and we both have our morning coffee together. And we live here on the lake, and so we look out on the lake together, and we think about it. And she's, the way she was socialized, and the way I was socialized, I tend to look at the upside, the positive side, and she tends to see the problem first, and.
Yeah,
although I'm also highly critical. But I trained myself, benefit the doubt kind of thinking, you know, when I was a teenager. And so she's developed this habit to be, to reorient herself to be the more positive outlook. She's not a negative or person, to be clear, Roberta.
No, I know.
But sometimes it's an effort to reorient ourselves. And as an effort to reorient herself, she'll look at me often and say, so what are 3 things you're grateful for this morning?
Oh, wow.
And often it's as simple as
That's a good question.
I'm grateful for this sunrise, you know, my kids.
It doesn't have to be profound.
No, it doesn't have to be profound at all. It's just 3 things you're thankful for today.
Yeah.
You know, and.
Well, I think that's a good thing because it's easy to just gripe about things. And so to recognize how many great things you have going, it's a good way to look at life.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you attend to the day, but aim at the highest good is written on my wall there. And so deal with the issues.
Really?
Yeah. Attend to the day, but aim up. I'm always headed in direction good, even when I'm currently standing in direction shit, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm aiming at direction good. So I'm going to be thinking on that, Bob. I'm going to be thinking on what 3 things would I want to be remembered for, you know, and what I would want my kids to remember. I think that's an interesting thing. That's what I love about these open format conversations, is that you never quite know where it's going to go. I didn't plan on talking to you about that today, but here we are.
Well, I think the things too that you might want other people to remember you for they would probably be different in some regards than what you'd want your kids to know you for, you know, but maybe not. Maybe they're universal enough that everyone could agree on. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I can't say that I've put a ton of thought into my legacy with my kids, but I did start years ago, I think, as the idea for a Christmas present that I've never fully materialized. But I started a file on my computer desktop that says the things that have shaped me. And I just put quotes in there. I put quotes and stories, you know, the things that, you know, I grew up with some, in close proximity to some people who couldn't control their anger. And so there's a phrase that I learned when I was young that helped me cope with that. It says, you know, you can tell the size of a man by the size of the things that makes him angry.
That's a good quote.
And so that goes into the file, you know, and it helps me understand. And I'm sure that you must have things that oriented yourself like that when you were living in the west side of Chicago, in that environment. You must have had ways to orient your mind, because you're not a tough street guy, but you're obviously tough enough to live there.
Yeah, but you're more well, I don't want to say I'm not thoughtful. I'm thoughtful, but I noticed the like at NAM you have those I'll call them aphorism, but they're quotes, you know, that you have up that by different people, and you brought it up now, and I think that I can see the fact that you have files, you're quite organized about this, and it's something that's well, it clearly has enough importance to you that you take the time to create these files and things like that. And I'm not, that I am a little bit more shooting from the hip, I think. I'm trying to put a positive spin on it. I feel like I'm lacking in this regard. I don't
Well, it
know.
doesn't show because I think that you're
okay.
very kind and generous and thoughtful person.
Well, thank you. So I try to be kind.
I am very sure that the world is a better place because of Bob Robinson.
Oh,
if there were
thanks.
more people around like you, then
that.
I think that we'd be headed in direction good. And so, yeah.
Well, that's a huge compliment. Thanks. I think that's great.
Yeah.
That I'll think about that.
So, well, sorry, did you have something else to say there?
No, I don't have anything. Let's see. We're almost. Yeah. I think at this point people are gonna be like, I need a cup of coffee, or how long can these guys go on?
They have a pause button, Bob. We don't get it in the live conversation. We'll get to pause real conversation. But I'll take the hint that Bob's bored and we should wrap this up. So, in my tradition of
I'm not bored. I'm not bored.
No.
Oh, I did want to say this though. When you were talking about your family, I just love the way your family all works together. I've always thought that was very special, and you're very lucky to get to work like you do with your family. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. I think I'm fortunate too. It's by design and it takes effort, but I appreciate.
No,
you saying
it's good. It's good. I like that you guys, the way you all work together. Yeah, you're a good family.
Yeah, I create business models that keeps our family together. That's the truth of it.
Yeah.
I
believe you.
And I try and look at my family and see them for who they are and say, how can I create a business model that makes sense where they're going to feel fulfilled in this?
Yeah.
You know, Zach is running the tech on this right now, and Zach loves cameras, and Zach likes history. Zach likes, so I try and see who Zach is, and I can't say that I've made the perfect role for Zach, but I'm very conscious of trying to create the right role. He's extremely social. He does very well at our events, and I think if we did events all year round, that there'd be no problem with exactly what Zach should be doing all the time, you know. But he also loves tech, and so when we're not doing events, you know, Zach handles our technical side of things, and he does our photography as well. I'm less and less involved in that, you know.
You guys do good photography.
Yeah. So thank you for saying so. So anyways, in the tradition of the show, I generally say something along the lines of, Bob, is there a topic you were hoping to discuss today? And that if I were a better interviewer, I might have known to ask?
No, I like the way it went. I was figuring it would just unfold and that we just, roll with the punches.
Yeah.
Good punches.
Good. Right back at you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob. So,
no, thank you.
We're going to wrap up this section of the show. We do have another segment that's generally only about 3 to 5 minutes long called The Business of Guitar. So if you're listening to this and you're in the guitar business and you're interested in hearing some of Bob's perspective about being a creative and a business owner for decades at this point in time, head on over to patreon.com/The Business of Guitar. Again, that's patreon.com/The Business of Guitar. And you'll hear Bob and I talk for another 3 to 5 minutes on another topic of guitar business. And so, again, thanks, Bob, for being on Life with Strings Attached. I truly meant it when I said that, I'm better for having known you. I truly believe that. And so thank you for all you do.
Oh, thank you very much, Jamie.
All right. We'll say goodbye for now.
Okay.
Ciao.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for watching and listening. You can find more episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts. And a special thanks to those who support us on Patreon. It's your support that enables us to do this work.